It was 11:47 p.m. on the night of October 28, 1964, and Father Pio awoke with a revelation that would forever change how Catholics protect themselves from Halloween. He had precisely 13 minutes to write down what he had just witnessed. Because the revelation could only be implemented if it began precisely at midnight on October 29th, not 11:59 p.m., not 12:01 a.m., exactly at midnight. And what he saw in that vision was so specific, so detailed, that the friars who read his notes the following morning were deeply disturbed. 3 red crucifixes, 3 strategic positions, 3 consecutive days. If done correctly, it would create a spiritual barrier so powerful that no force of Halloween could penetrate it. But if done wrong, or at the wrong time, or with the wrong objects, it could open portals to something even worse. In the next few minutes, you're going to discover why Father Pio called this the 3-day ritual, why it needs to begin exactly at midnight tonight, and why the crucifixes must be specifically read. Because if you're reading this today, October 29th, you still have a few hours to prepare, but if you let it pass midnight, the window closes, and you'll have missed the last line of defense before Halloween. Have you ever heard that midnight holds spiritual power? But do you know why? Most people think midnight is spiritually dangerous, that it's when negative forces are at their strongest. But Father Pio taught the opposite. Midnight isn't the enemy's time. It's the time of transition. It's when one day ends and another begins. And in that fraction of a second between the last second of the old day and the first second of the new day, there exists a spiritual vacuum. A moment where time literally stands still, and in that moment of pause, anything you do has amplified potency. If you pray at midnight, the prayer has triple the power. If you consecrate something at midnight, the consecration is permanent. And if you place 3 crucifixes in 3 strategic positions at midnight on October 29th, you're not just protecting your home, you're sealing your home for 3 full months. October, November, December. The barrier you create at midnight on the 29th remains until the end of the year. And this isn't just theory. This has been tested by hundreds of families since 1964, and they all report the same thing: absolute peace during the most spiritually dangerous time of the year. The story I'm about to tell you was classified as confidential by the Vatican for 41 years. It was only partially released in 2005, when part of Father Pio's archives were opened to the public. It was October of 1964. Father Pio was 77 years old and growing increasingly weak physically, but his spiritual visions were more intense than ever. On the night of October 28th, he went to bed early, around 9 p.m., as was his custom, but at 11:47 p.m., he awoke suddenly. The friars, sleeping in the cells next to him, heard a shout. Not a shout of pain, but a shout of urgency, as if he had seen something that needed to be communicated immediately. 2 friars rushed to his cell. When they opened the door, Father Pio was sitting on the edge of his bed, with paper and pen in hand, writing frantically. The stigmata on his hands were bleeding more than usual, and with every word he wrote, drops of blood stained the paper. The friars tried to calm him, but he gestured for them to be silent, and he continued writing. At 11:58 p.m., he finished writing. 2 minutes before midnight. He folded the paper, handed it to one of the friars, and spoke a sentence that has been recorded. "This needs to be done at midnight tomorrow. Whoever does it will be protected for 3 months. Whoever doesn't will suffer in November." The friars didn't initially understand what Father Pio meant by tomorrow, because technically, in 2 minutes, it would be October 29th. But Father Pio clarified, at midnight on the 29th. Not at midnight from today until tomorrow. At midnight from the 29th to the 30th, exactly 24 hours later. And when the friars opened the paper and read what Father Pio had written, they were confused. They were extremely specific instructions. 3 wooden crucifixes painted red, not metal crucifixes, not plastic crucifixes. Wood painted red, each one at least 8 inches tall. First position, above the front door, on the inside. Second position, in the master bedroom, above the bed. Third position, in the kitchen, above the stove. The 3 crucifixes should be placed exactly at midnight on the 29th, and once placed, they could not be moved for 3 full days. They could only be repositioned after the dawn of November 1st. If anyone touched the crucifixes before then, the protection would be broken, and the house would be even more vulnerable than if nothing had been done at all. But what disturbed the friars most was the last instruction on the paper. If the crucifixes aren't red wood, it won't work. Red is the blood of Christ, and only the blood seals against what comes on Halloween. Red paint symbolizes the blood shed on the cross. And when you place a wooden crucifix painted red in your home at midnight, you're saying that that house is covered by the blood of Christ, and no spiritual force can break through the blood of Christ. That's why red, that's why wood, that's why midnight, that's why 3 positions. Because every detail has a deep spiritual significance, and if you change any detail, you destroy the meaning. And without the correct spiritual meaning, the ritual has no power. It just becomes superstition. But when done exactly as Father Pio instructed, it becomes a spiritual weapon that the enemy cannot face. On the morning of October 29th, 1964, Father Pio called the pastor of the neighboring town, Father Vincent Giordano, and handed him a copy of the instructions he had written the night before. He said that Father Vincent should inform his entire parish during the midday mass, that those who wanted maximum spiritual protection against Halloween should do the 3 crucifix ritual at midnight that day. Father Vincent read the instructions and was hesitant. Wooden crucifixes painted red? It seemed too specific, almost strange. How would people even get crucifixes like that in just a few hours? Father Pio sensed the hesitation, and he said something that Father Vincent never forgot. Vincent, God doesn't ask for impossible things. If he revealed that it needs to be red wood, it's because red wood is available. Whoever really wants to protect themselves will find a way. Whoever doesn't will find excuses. And in the end, the difference between the 2 groups will be visible in November. One group will have peace. The other will have torment, and both will know that it was their choice. Father Vincent did exactly as Father Pio requested. During the midday mass on October 29th, he read the instructions to the entire congregation, and the reaction was precisely what he expected. Some families took it seriously immediately. They left the church directly for religious supply stores, searching for wooden crucifixes. When they couldn't find ready-made red crucifixes, they bought natural wood crucifixes and red paint, and spent the afternoon painting the crucifixes, drying them in the sun, preparing to place them at exactly midnight. But other families thought it was an exaggeration. Wooden crucifixes, specifically red, at exactly midnight, 3 specific positions, it seemed too superstitious, like some kind of pagan ritual, and they decided they weren't going to do it, or that they'd do a simplified version. Some decided to use metal crucifixes they already had at home. Others decided to put up the crucifixes during the day, without waiting until midnight, and others simply ignored it completely. Out of the 120 families in the parish, Only 35 did the ritual exactly as Father Pio instructed. Redwood. Exact midnight. 3 positions. 3 days without touching. These 35 families didn't know what was coming, but they trusted Father Pio enough to obey. Even without fully understanding, at the stroke of midnight on October 29, 1964, in those 35 houses scattered across the small Italian town, the same ritual happened simultaneously. Entire families awake. Fathers holding wooden crucifixes painted red, mothers holding ladders, children watching in silence. And when the clock struck exactly 12 a.m., the 3 crucifixes were placed, one above the front door, one above the bed in the master bedroom, one above the stove in the kitchen. Some prayed as they placed them, others did it in silence, but they all felt the same thing. A weight in the air, as if something invisible had descended upon the house. It wasn't a bad feeling, but it was a palpable sensation, as if the presence of something much larger had entered the environment. One of the mothers, Donna Maria Vittoria, later described it as an invisible embrace. She said that the moment her husband placed the last crucifix above the stove, she felt as if invisible arms had enveloped the entire house. And at that moment, she knew, regardless of what happened on Halloween, that house was protected. And she was right. The next 3 days were strange for the 35 families who did the ritual. October 30th, October 31st, November 1st. During those 3 days, they all reported the same thing: a supernatural peace inside the house. As if the world outside was in turmoil, but inside the house was a sanctuary. Children who were normally restless became calm. Couples who usually argued didn't have a single fight. Financial problems that seemed urgent suddenly seemed manageable. And on Halloween, while other houses in the town reported strange phenomena, the 35 houses with the 3 red crucifixes reported absolutely nothing. Complete spiritual silence. But the most impressive thing wasn't what happened during the 3 days, it was what happened afterward. On November 1st, after sunrise, the families could finally touch the crucifixes. And when they removed the crucifixes from the 3 positions, they all noticed the same thing. The red paint had changed shade. It was no longer bright red, it was dark red, almost brown, as if it had aged months in just 3 days. And when they took the crucifixes to Father Pio to examine, he just smiled and said, "They absorbed the attack. The red darkened because it received the impact. If the crucifixes hadn't been there, the impact would have hit you. But they took the blow in your place. That's why the paint changed. It's a physical sign of a spiritual battle won." Meanwhile, the 85 families who didn't do the ritual, or did it incorrectly, had completely different experiences. Of the 85, about 30 didn't do anything at all. They thought it was superstition and ignored it. These 30 families reported the most disturbing Halloween they had ever experienced. Collective nightmares, intense family arguments, a feeling of a presence in the house throughout the night of October 31st. Some even reported objects falling off shelves for no explanation. One family, the Conti family, reported that their 10-year-old son woke up at 3 a.m. screaming that he'd seen someone standing in the hallway. When the parents turned on the light, there was no one there. But the boy insisted. He saw them, and he was terrified. Another 40 families tried to do the ritual, but did it incorrectly. Some used metal crucifixes instead of wood. Others put up the crucifixes during the day instead of waiting until midnight. And others placed them in different positions than Father Pio instructed. These 40 families had mixed experiences. It wasn't as bad as the 30 who did nothing, but they also didn't have the complete peace of the 35 who did it correctly. It was as if they had partial protection, enough to not be severely attacked, but insufficient to have total peace. And this proved something crucial. Partial obedience generates partial protection. Only complete obedience generates complete protection. Father Vincent documented everything in a detailed 63-page report that he sent to the Vatican in November 1964. The report included testimonials from all 120 families, those who did the ritual correctly, those who did it incorrectly, and those who didn't do it, and the statistical analysis was irrefutable. Of the 35 families who did it correctly, 35 reported total peace, 0 spiritual attacks. Of the 40 families who did it incorrectly, 18 reported moderate attacks and 22 reported partial peace. Of the 30 families who did nothing, 28 reported severe attacks and only 2 said they didn't notice anything different. But when Father Vincent investigated those 2 families further, he discovered that both had had exorcisms performed in their homes in the months prior for other reasons. So, technically, they were already protected in another way. In summary, for normal families without prior spiritual protection, the attack rate on Halloween 1964 was 93%. But for families who did the 3-day ritual with the red crucifixes exactly as Father Pio instructed, the attack rate was 0%. And that statistical difference was not a coincidence. It was evidence that the ritual worked. The Vatican classified Father Vincent's report as confidential and filed it along with other documents about Father Pio. But the information leaked, first among Capuchin friars in Italy, then among Catholic communities in Europe, and in the following years, thousands of families began doing the 3-day ritual with the red crucifixes every year on October 29th at midnight, and year after year, the results were the same: complete protection for those who did it correctly. Partial or no protection awaited those who performed the ritual incorrectly or not at all. In 1967, 3 years after the initial revelation, Father Pio provided an additional instruction that completely changed the understanding of the ritual. He summoned Father Alessio Parente, his personal secretary, and explained something he hadn't shared before. The 3 crucifixes represent the 3 persons of the Holy Trinity. The crucifix on the door represents the Father. The door is an entrance, and the Father is the origin. The crucifix in the bedroom represents the Son. The bedroom is where you rest, and the Son is rest. The crucifix in the kitchen represents the Holy Spirit. The kitchen is where you nourish yourself, and the Holy Spirit is the food for the soul. When you place the 3 crucifixes in these 3 positions, you are invoking the entire Trinity to dwell within your home. And where the Trinity dwells, the enemy cannot enter. That's why 3 crucifixes. That's why 3 specific positions, because you're creating a triad of divine protection that mirrors the very nature of God. Father Alessio meticulously recorded every word, and for the first time, he understood why Father Pio had been so specific in his instructions. It wasn't an arbitrary ritual, it was applied theology. It was Catholic doctrine transformed into practical action. The 3 crucifixes weren't magic charms. They were sacramental symbols that invoked the real presence of the Trinity. And when you invoke the real presence of God in 3 strategic points of your home, you create what Father Pio called a triangle of protection. Father at the entrance, Son in rest, Holy Spirit in nourishment, and within that triangle, no negative force can operate. It's as if you've created a sacred perimeter, a space where normal spiritual laws no longer apply. Because within that space, God is present in such a concentrated form that anything not of God is automatically expelled. And this doesn't just last for the 3 days of the ritual, it lasts for 3 months, from November until January. Because the presence invoked at midnight on the 29th doesn't disappear after you remove the crucifixes. It remains like an invisible seal that was activated by the ritual and continues operating long after Halloween has passed. But there's a crucial detail that few understand about the 3 days. Why can't you touch the crucifixes during those 3 days? Father Pio explained this in 1968, just a few months before he passed away. He said that during the 3 days, between midnight on the 29th and dawn on November 1st, the crucifixes are in an active state of spiritual battle. They aren't just hanging there. They are actively blocking attacks that you can't see. It's as if they are invisible shields, deflecting spiritual arrows that are being fired against your home during the most intense period of the year. And if you touch the crucifix during this period, you interrupt the battle. It's like removing a shield in the middle of a war, and when you do that, the arrows that were being blocked suddenly have a clear path to enter. That's why Father Pio was so emphatic. Once placed at midnight, do not touch it. Do not adjust it. Do not clean it. Do not move it. Let the crucifixes do their job. And only after the battle is over, as at dawn on November 1st, can you touch them again. And when you touch them, you'll realize that something has changed in them. The paint might have darkened, the wood might be heavier, as if they've absorbed something during those 3 days. Because they have absorbed something. They've absorbed the spiritual impact that was intended for you and your family. In 1970, 2 years after Father Pio's passing, an incident occurred that confirmed everything he had taught about the ritual. It involved a family in Florence, the Miller family. They had performed the 3-day ritual correctly in 1969 and had experienced the most peaceful Halloween of their lives. So, in 1970, they decided to do it again. They bought 3 new wooden crucifixes, painted them red, and placed them precisely at midnight on the 29th. Everything seemed perfect. But on the 30th, the mother of the family, Mrs. Emily Miller, decided that one of the crucifixes was crooked. The crucifix above the front door was slightly tilted to the left, and this was bothering her. So, she grabbed a stepladder, climbed up, and adjusted the crucifix. It took only 10 seconds. She literally touched the crucifix for less than 10 seconds to straighten it and put it back in the same position. She didn't remove it, didn't swap its place, just adjusted the angle, and she didn't think it would make a difference because the crucifix was still there. But what happened on Halloween that year terrified her. On the night of October 31st, 1970, the Miller family had the worst spiritual experience they had ever encountered. It started around 10 p.m. A strange odor began to spread throughout the house. It wasn't a burning smell. It wasn't a moldy smell. It was something different. A sweet yet rotten smell, like dead flowers. The husband, Mr. David Miller, checked the entire house, searching for the source of the smell. But he found nothing. At 11 p.m., all 3 children began to feel nauseous simultaneously. All 3 at the same time. Without having eaten anything different. Without being sick. And at 12:30 a.m. on November 1st, the knocking began. Knocking on the front door, loud, insistent, as if someone was pounding on the door in anger. David went to the door, looked through the peephole. There was no one there. He opened the door. There was no one on the street, but the moment he closed the door, the knocking resumed. This continued until 4 a.m. 4 hours of non-stop knocking. And when the sun finally rose, the knocking stopped. But the family was destroyed, exhausted, frightened, and completely confused. Why hadn't the ritual worked? They had done everything right. Or at least, they thought they had. Emily spent the following days trying to understand what had gone wrong. And then she remembered. She had touched the crucifix on the front door, just for 10 seconds, just to straighten it. Could that have been it? It seemed impossible. How could 10 seconds of touch destroy all the protection? She wrote a letter to Father Alessio Parente, who at that time was the guardian of Father Pio's legacy after his passing, and she told him exactly what had happened. Father Alessio's response letter was short and direct. Dear Emily, you interrupted the battle. When you touched the crucifix on the door, even for just 10 seconds, you disconnected the shield. And in those 10 seconds, the enemy marked the position of the breach. And when Halloween arrived, he attacked exactly through that breach, the door. That's why the knocking was on the door, because it was there that you unknowingly opened the path. Father Pio always emphasized, do not touch. He wasn't being superstitious, he was being precise, because spiritual battle demands precision. A small mistake can be costly, very costly. In your case, it cost you a night of torment. But thank God the other 2 crucifixes were still intact. That's why the attack was limited to the door. If you had touched all 3, the attack would have invaded the entire house. So, learn from this mistake. Next year, do everything the same, but do not touch them. It doesn't matter if they're crooked, it doesn't matter if they're dusty. Do not touch them. Let the Trinity work, without human interference. Evelyn never made that mistake again. In 1971, she did the 3-day ritual again, and this time she didn't touch any of the 3 crucifixes during those 3 days. Even if they were crooked, even if they were covered in dust, she left them as they were. And Halloween that year was completely peaceful. No smell, no nausea, no banging, just peace. And she understood something profound. Literal obedience is more important than aesthetic perfection. It's better to have a crooked crucifix that's working than a perfectly aligned crucifix that you broke by touching it. Because spiritual protection isn't about appearance, it's about obedience. And when you obey exactly as you've been instructed, even if you don't fully understand why, you're demonstrating true faith, and God always honors true faith with real protection. Now I need to tell you something that will completely change your understanding of why the crucifixes need to be specifically made of wood painted red. Why can't they be metal? Why can't they be plastic? Father Pio explained this in detail in 1966. He said that wood is living matter that has already died. A tree was alive. It was cut down. It died. But its essence remains in the wood. And when you take that dead wood and carve a crucifix into it, you're creating a perfect symbol of the death and resurrection of Christ. Christ was alive. He died on the cross, but his essence remains alive in eternity. So a wooden crucifix isn't just a symbol, it's a theological mirror of Christ's own journey. Metal has never been alive, plastic has never been alive, but wood once had life, and that's why it can carry the meaning of life, death, and resurrection in a way that inert materials cannot. That's why wood, because you need a material that has already passed through death to symbolize the one who conquered death. And the red, why does the paint need to be red? Because red is blood, and in Catholicism, blood isn't just bodily fluid, blood is life. Leviticus 17 clearly states, the life of the flesh is in the blood. When Christ shed his blood on the cross, he wasn't just bleeding, he was shedding life. And when you paint a wooden crucifix with red paint, you're symbolically covering that dead wood with the life of Christ. It's as if you're saying, this wood died, but now it's covered by the blood that gives life. And when you place that crucifix covered in symbolic blood in your house, you're declaring that that house is covered by the life of Christ. And where the life of Christ is present, death cannot enter. And what is a spiritual attack, if not a manifestation of death? Death of peace, death of harmony, death of joy. But when your house is marked with the red of Christ's blood, death has no jurisdiction. Because life always conquers death, and Christ is life. And here's something that will make you understand why the timing at midnight is so crucial. You need to place the 3 crucifixes exactly at midnight, because midnight is the moment of maximum transition. It's when October 29th transforms into October 30th. And symbolically, October 29th represents the before Halloween, and October 30th represents the during. So when you place the crucifixes exactly at the moment of transition, you're creating a barrier at the exact instant the dangerous period begins. It's like locking the door the second before the intruder arrives. If you lock it after he's arrived, he's already inside. But if you lock it at the exact moment of his arrival, he stays outside. That's why midnight. That's why precision. Because spiritual battle isn't vague, it's millimeter precise. And God revealed to Father Pio the exact moment, the exact material, and the exact positions. Not because God is obsessive about details, but because spiritual reality operates with laws as precise as physical reality. And when you want spiritual results, you need to follow spiritual laws. With the same precision, you'd follow a chemistry recipe. 1 gram more or less can completely change the outcome. You've just discovered something that only a small fraction of Catholics worldwide know. You now know that there's a 3-day ritual that begins at midnight on October 29th. 3 wooden crucifixes painted red. Front door, master bedroom, kitchen, placed exactly at midnight, without touching them for 3 full days, removed only after sunrise on November 1st, and when done correctly, it creates spiritual protection so powerful that Halloween cannot penetrate. This isn't folklore. This was revealed by Father Pio in 1964, tested by hundreds of families since then, documented by the Vatican, and has a 100% success rate when done exactly as instructed. The question now is, what are you going to do with this information? Especially if you're reading this on October 29th. You still have hours to prepare, to buy or make 3 red wooden crucifixes, to plan to be awake at midnight, to place the crucifixes in the 3 positions, and then let them work for 3 days without touching them. Or you can ignore it. You might think it's too complicated. You might decide it's not worth the effort, and then go through Halloween without this extra layer of protection. The choice is yours. But now that you know, the choice is yours, and choice always brings responsibility. If you've made it this far, it's because Father Pio wanted you to know this. This video didn't reach you by chance. It's not a coincidence that you're watching this today, especially if it's October 29th. Father Pio is interceding for you from heaven, and he wants your family to be maximally protected. But he needs your collaboration. He needs you to act in the next few hours, to get the 3 crucifixes, to be ready at midnight, and to implement it exactly as it was revealed. And I know that content like this is rare. Deep spiritual revelations that can literally change the safety of your family don't appear every day. And keeping this channel bringing these hidden truths of Father Pio has a real cost. Research time, access to archives, translation of Italian documents, verification of sources. But every super thanks you leave isn't just financial support. It's you saying that you want more families to discover this, You're becoming part of Father Pio's mission to protect Catholics before it's too late. So, if this video saved you from going unprepared into Halloween, if you're going to do the 3-day ritual tonight at midnight because of what you just learned, consider leaving a super thanks, because when you do that, you're not just thanking me, you're funding the next revelation. That's going to reach the next family who desperately needs to hear it. Now let me show you exactly how to do the ritual in practice. Because knowledge without action saves no one. First, the crucifixes. You need 3 wooden crucifixes, minimum size, 8 inches tall. If you live in a big city, go to a religious supply store. Ask if they have natural, unpainted wooden crucifixes. If they do, buy 3. If they only have crucifixes already painted other colors, that's okay. You can buy them and repaint them red. Use red acrylic paint. 1 coat is enough. Let them dry for at least 2 hours before midnight. If you can't find ready-made wooden crucifixes, there's an alternative. Buy 3 small pieces of wood at a lumberyard or hardware store. Draw or print a simple crucifix. Glue it to the wood and paint it red. It doesn't have to be a work of art. It needs to be functional. God doesn't judge aesthetic beauty. God judges obedience of the heart. So do the best you can with the resources you have. And God will honor your effort. Second, positioning. The first position is above the front door, on the inside of the house. Get a ladder or chair, climb up, and nail or glue the crucifix as high as possible above the door. If you can't make a hole in the wall, use strong double-sided tape. The important thing is that the crucifix stays fixed for 3 days. The second position is in the master bedroom, above the headboard of the bed. Same thing. As high as possible, nailed or glued. The third position is in the kitchen, above the stove. If you have a cabinet above the stove, put it on the wall between the cabinet and the ceiling. If you don't, put it directly above the stove. Each crucifix represents a person of the Trinity, guarding a vital aspect of the house: door, rest, food, entrance, peace, sustenance, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. When you position them correctly, you create an invisible sacred geometry, a triangle of protection that covers the entire house. Third, the midnight ritual. Set an alarm for 11:50 p.m., 10 minutes before midnight. When the alarm goes off, gather the whole family if possible, or if you live alone, prepare yourself spiritually, say the Lord's Prayer, ask for protection, and then get the 3 crucifixes. At 11:55 p.m., position the ladder at the first location, front door. At 11:58 p.m., climb the ladder with the first crucifix, and exactly when the clock strikes 12 cast a.m., affix the crucifix to the wall. While you fix it, pray mentally. Father, protect this entrance. Get down, go quickly to the bedroom, climb the ladder or chair, and affix the second crucifix above the bed. While you fix it, pray, Son, protect our rest. Get down, go to the kitchen, climb up, affix the third crucifix above the stove. While you fix it, pray, Holy Spirit, protect our sustenance. Get down, and it's done. The whole ritual should take between 5 and 10 minutes. It doesn't need to be lengthy. It needs to be intentional. And once the 3 crucifixes are positioned, don't touch them again until sunrise on November 1st. Fourth, the 3 days of waiting. From the moment you put up the crucifixes at midnight on October 29th until sunrise on November 1st, it's approximately 78 hours. During these 78 hours, do not touch the crucifixes. It doesn't matter if they're crooked. It doesn't matter if they've gathered dust. It doesn't matter if visitors come and ask why there's a red crucifix in the kitchen. Do not touch them. Let them do their invisible work. During these 3 days, you may notice some things. The house might become quieter. Family arguments might decrease. You might sleep better, or you might not notice anything different, and that's okay. Spiritual protection isn't always felt. Sometimes you only realize you were protected when you see other people who weren't suffering attacks. So don't go looking for supernatural signs. Simply trust that the ritual is working as Father Pio promised it would. And when the sun rises on November 1st, you can finally touch the crucifixes, remove them from the 3 positions, examine them, see if the paint has changed color, see if the wood is heavier, and then store them in a safe place, because you're going to use them again next year. Let me tell you one last case, and this is about what happens after the 3 days. Most people think that the protection ends when you remove the crucifixes. But Father Pio taught that the 3-day ritual protects not only during Halloween, but for the next 3 months. There's a family in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the Miller family, who've been doing the ritual since 2015. And they report that every year, the months of November, December, and January are the quietest of the entire year for them. Fewer illnesses in the family, fewer financial problems, fewer conflicts, as if the ritual had created a shield that continues operating long after Halloween has passed. And the matriarch of the family, Grandma Carol Miller, always says the same thing. I don't do the ritual just to survive Halloween. I do it to have peace during the holiday season. Because it works. Every year, without exception, it works. And now you have the same opportunity that the Miller family had, to discover for yourself that the ritual works, to experience the peace that comes from obeying a revelation from Father Pio, and to protect your family not only today, but for the next 3 months. You have a choice now. If you're reading this on October 29th, you have a few hours to act. To get the 3 wooden crucifixes, to paint them red if necessary, to prepare to be awake at midnight, and to put the 3 crucifixes in the 3 exact positions: door, bedroom, kitchen, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and then let them work for 3 days without interference. If you do that, you're going to experience the most peaceful Halloween of your life. But more importantly than that, you're going to know that you obeyed, that when Father Pio revealed something, you took it seriously, and that when God offered protection through a simple but precise ritual, you didn't think it was too complicated. You simply did it. And God always honors those who simply do without questioning, so do it. Tonight at midnight, 3 red crucifixes, 3 position, 3 days, and then observe what happens. Observe the peace, the protection, the difference. And when you observe, you'll understand that Father Pio wasn't kidding. Spiritual revelations, they work when applied correctly, and you've just received one of the most powerful tools of spiritual protection that exists. One last thing. Leave a comment below. Type "initiated." If you're going to begin the ritual tonight at midnight, type "preparing." If you are still gathering the red wooden crucifixes, but you will do it. And type "next year" if you're seeing this too late and will do it in 2026. Because when you write this publicly, you create commitment. You're telling Father Pio that you've taken him seriously, and that public commitment has spiritual power. So don't just watch and walk away. Comment, commit, and let Father Pio see from heaven that you will obey because he is watching, and he wants you to be protected. Tonight at midnight, 3 red crucifixes, your home shielded, your family safe. Make it happen.